Our next panel on the program, Simon Banks and Kerry Chikarovski, to talk through the day in Parliament. Look, let's begin with Angus Taylor. I thought it was interesting today, the contribution from the New South Wales Police Commissioner saying strike force, you know, it's a pretty ominous sounding thing, you set up a strike force, but it's just an investigation so far because it was a serious accusation and because it's made by Mark Dreyfus. So hearing strike force doesn't mean, oh, there's definitely something in this, essentially.
Well, you need to understand the process is through that the police go forward to determine whether or not they're going to conduct an investigation. They actually conduct an initial process which is sort of known as an inquiry, which is basically, is there a reasonable basis for an investigation? Is there the potential for some criminal offence to have been caused? It doesn't mean that the conclusion is that one has. The nature of the information that puts them has to reach a benchmark where they go, it's actually worth allocating police resources to this investigation.
Yeah, but he also stressed that it's not even known whether any crime was committed.
No, and the answer is that's the whole purpose of the investigation. But we do have a fundamental problem here, is that a document's been put into the public domain by the Minister and his office. At the moment there's no evidence that that is a legitimate document in any way, shape or form. In fact, all of the evidence on the public domain to date says that it was not a legitimate document.
Well, we know that the figures are wrong. The evidence has been presented of metadata on one side. We can't be categorical that it was forged, can we?
Well, if the document wasn't on the website at the time that the Minister said it was on the website, it had to come from somewhere, and it didn't come, therefore, from the Sydney City Council, did it?
Where do you sit on this, Kerry, and the handling, I guess, from the government? Scott Morrison not for turning on this, and seems, on the face of it, pretty confident it'll be okay. I don't know exactly what that's based on, but what have you made of this week and how it's played out?
Well, look, I don't think the Prime Minister could have done much more than what he's done, actually. I mean, to be fair, this is an allegation or an inquiry which has been brought about because the Labor Party have initiated it, and I don't actually believe the Labor Party have initiated this because they're particularly concerned about the criminality or otherwise of this particular issue. I think they've initiated it, as you would expect an opposition to do. They see this as an opportunity to embarrass both Angus Taylor, the government, and more particularly the Prime Minister, who they're trying to sheet the blame home to by saying he should be putting Angus Taylor off the front bench while this is being investigated. So look, the politics of it, I think, are entirely predictable. I think the Prime Minister's response has been pretty measured. I think he said that, you know, yes, he spoke to the Police Commissioner. And again, I think it's not inappropriate for the Prime Minister to have spoken to the Police Commissioner to ascertain the level of the investigation and the concern, particularly since the Labor Party are calling for the Minister to stand down. It's probably inappropriate for the Prime Minister to stand the Minister down without having some background information about why he would be standing him down. And I know someone's going to say, someone has already said, oh, you know, anybody could have rung the Commissioner. But, you know, purely because of the protocol of this thing, you don't get some staffer to ring the Police Commissioner about an allegation against a minister. I didn't think it was inappropriate for him to call him. I don't think it was inappropriate. The Police Commissioner clearly thought it was appropriate and isn't concerned about it. So I think, as I said, the politics are playing out exactly as you'd expect it to.
Do you see it as the standards have dropped at all?
No, I don't.
Sorry, the more interesting part. Go on, Kerry.
Well, I was going to say the more interesting part of this is how that document came about. And, you know, the Minister has said he hasn't done it. The Council says it's not their document. You know, who's decided to play mischief with all of this? And I think that is what this investigation will...
We do know
that's what the investigation
figures were incorrect that were used. That is true. Would it help? I mean, do we need a standard where in that stage a Minister stands aside, not stands down?
Well, I mean, again, if this was not an investigation which was initiated as a political investigation in the first instance, and I like Mr. Dreyfus, I think he's a very good man. He's a very good lawyer, but I honestly cannot look you in the eye, Tom, and say that he's done this because he's concerned about an infraction of the law. They've done this because they see this as a political ploy.
Agree with that?
Well, where did this document come from? I mean, this comes to a very basic point.
Yeah, but that's not answering the question.
If a false document is put in the public domain by someone, then public integrity surely means we need to know where it came from. Now, if the Minister didn't produce this document himself, if it didn't come from his office, he presumably, or his office knows, where this document came from. I think the public are entitled to know that. And let's look at what the standard, at the worst case scenario we could be looking here, is that a deliberately forged document is being used to try and damage a political opponent. Well, I don't think we want an Australian political environment where that is an acceptable standard in any way, shape or form.
All right.
Regardless of whether or not that conduct may or may not be criminal, I would say, you ask any person in the street, they would say that is grossly unacceptable.
I do want to get